let's talk about BYU training camp. Now, today is the formal end of training camp, as Connor Pay detailed yesterday. BYU will have meetings today, and then starting tomorrow, it is game week mode for the BYU Cougars. They'll spend about a week and a half getting ready for that opener against Southern Illinois, and I feel like it's a long time coming because it really has been a long time coming for the BYU football program. The thing I wanted to talk about today is to talk about what I'm taking out of training camp as we now make that transition into game week mode. So I've got a little thing. I wrote this down and I called them like my awards. I didn't have a good title for them, like the Cougars or like really weird names out there that I kept thinking of. I couldn't ever think of really anything that was effective. So if you do have an idea for me of what I could call these in the future, drop us a note. Drop it in the YouTube comments below. Drop us a note via social media or email the show, lockedonbyu@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your guys' insight on this. So my superlatives or my awards for BYU training camp. Most improved unit for BYU. I'm going to give that to BYU's cornerbacks on the defense. Now, coming into training camp, it wasn't necessarily a position group they were thinking, okay, they're in dire straits, but with Jakob Robinson there, you're like, okay, they got at least one solidified spot at the cornerback position. What about the other cornerback spot? Well, we saw Mory Bamba take the early reps in training camp while Marque worked his way to full fitness. Over the past week or so, Marque, the Weber State transfer, has really kind of emerged and has become, I think, the complement at that other opposite corner spot of Jakob Robinson. And I think with the depth of what Mory Bamba showed in training camp, as well as the ascension of guys like Evan Johnson, you also can include Trey Alexander, Jonathan Cabella. Who else am I thinking of? Matthias Leach. A lot of the younger players in that unit have come a long way in training camp, and the hope is that it's not all fool's gold, that they have actually improved. And if that is truly the case, BYU's cornerbacks are actually going to be far better than I anticipated them being going into training camp. So I'm going to give them the award. I also had nominees for offensive line. I talked about running backs, but I felt like, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten track and talk about BYU's cornerbacks because I do think that they have a critical role to fill in this BYU defense. If they can hold opposing wide receivers in one-on-one covers, those man press scenarios, and just make sure that it's a no-fly zone for opposing teams, that's going to help BYU out quite a bit. And it's going to be a critical element if BYU wants to improve on defense this fall. Now, the unit still with the most to prove to me is BYU's defensive line. I have heard a lot during training camp from people inside the program about how BYU's defensive line has been holding their own. They've been stonewalling BYU's O-line and making life miserable for Connor Pay and his teammates on the offensive line. I want to see it in game. I'm going to echo what Aaron Roderick has been crowing about all camp long. We can talk, but I want to see it proven in game. I have got concerns that you're running back essentially the same unit of defensive linemen for BYU, but I am expecting to have a better production from a year ago. I know they invested heavily on that defensive coaching staff front. You got guys like Gary Anderson and Chad Kauha'aha'a who are they're essentially glorified assistant coaches. They're analysts and consultants. We also have Sione Puha as the defensive tackles coach. You got Kelly Papinga as the D-ends coach. They've got to deliver in a big way. I've expressed confidence that what I'm hearing about this defensive line unit is not all fluff and it's not going to be what it was a season ago. But I still believe it's got to be proven in game. So the team, I guess the position group with the most to prove, it is the BYU defensive line. The position group that I still think has a lot going for it that I have not really considered worrying about is BYU's wide receiver group. Think about it. BYU's got their top 6 pass catchers and 7 if you want to include Keanu Hill, who's now a tight end for BYU, back from last year's team. They have a lot of proven production at that wide receiver group, and the hope is that with that production and obviously the experience of having played in the Big 12 previously, no matter who ends up as BYU's quarterback, will have a complement of weapons around them that if they can effectively deliver the football to those guys, they're going to make them look good. We talked about the rushing attack needing to be a big part of BYU's hopes this year. Well, you know what? When they have those opportunities, if that rushing attack is as effective as we hope it is, well, the best part is those wide receivers find themselves in one-on-one situations. And if you can find yourself open, I have trust that whether it's Jake Retzlaff or Gerry Bohanon, they will deliver a strike down the field and hook up with these guys and make it look easy in the process. That is the hope for the BYU wide receiver group because I just want to see them do their thing. I had very little concerns about them coming into training camp. Don't make me look like a fool now. That's my hope for that. Now, some individual awards. I talked about at the outset of training camp how there would be a guy that would pop up in training camp that was going to steal headlines and make people think, okay, what could this kid offer to the BYU football program? And then you quite literally, and it's sad to say, you never see him in season. The guy I'm going to award that to, and actually it's kind of, no, I'm going to give it to one guy, Sione Moa. Now, it's nothing against Sione himself. He's a walk-on running back from Timpview High School who has been running with the third and fourth string units for BYU on offense. But when you have LJ Martin, when you have Hinckley Ropati, when you have Miles Davis, you had Pokai Haunga, Jovesa Damuni, some of the names at that running back position for BYU, I feel like Sione Moa may be the odd man out there. And it's nothing against him because he is shown to be very effective in training camp so far. And if he wants to prove himself, well, guess what? When he gets those opportunities, go out there and prove it. Maybe he gets that opportunity against Southern Illinois in mop-up duty time, and he shows that he's capable. Well, that's what it's going to take for him to make me eat crow on this. But that's the only thing I have concern about is with the other names in front of him at running back, he could find himself buried on the depth chart, and you just don't see him very often for BYU this fall. It doesn't take anything away from his talent, what he offers to the BYU football program, how capable he was in training camp. But I had to award that award, and that's who gets to carry it going forward here. But that's one of those awards that I always love when a guy ends up proving me dead wrong. And in this case, I hope it's Sione Moa, because I call him Sione Moa because there's also a Sione Moa on defense who's a linebacker that we also have to kind of differentiate the two. So kind of in the media group we've talked about, we're going to, what, Sione Moa is how we're going to refer to him. So keep an eye on that. If I'm wrong about it and he proves to be a capable back and part of the rotation, great. Love to see it. I love when guys exceed expectations for the BYU football program. Now, the guy that I think still has a lot to prove just in terms of what I want to see from him out on the football field, essentially kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about, is I'm looking at this as a major opportunity for Harrison Taggart. Harrison Taggart, I think, is going to be BYU starting middle linebacker, and he's got sizable shoes to fill with Ben Bywater exiting the program with his medical retirement. That's a disappointing thing to see Ben have to step away from the game that he loves. And I think you look at it and you think, who could step into that role and fill it the way it needs to be filled? And I don't think there's a like-for-like replacement on the roster, but Harrison Taggart is going to get, I believe, the first crack at being that guy. Harrison has worked extremely hard. He's bulked up. He's kept his sideline to sideline speed. He's not the tallest guy in terms of those linebackers out there, but what he lacks in height, he makes up for with just playmaking ability. Can he really become that stalwart, the guy who's in the middle of that defense, calling out the audibles, because he will have that green dot on his helmet. He'll have that communication system calling the plays from Jay Hill in his helmet. Can he be that field general on defense that BYU needs him to be? I hope he does, because that he's got a lot to prove, because Ben Bywater was one of the leading tackle leaders in the Big 12 coming into the season. And he was, for lack of a better term, the heart and soul of that BYU defense for the better part of 3 seasons. You don't replace that very easily, but Harrison Taggart, he's got a lot to prove. And if he proves it, that could be a really, really nice thing, because that means BYU's defense is going to be that much more effective as they go into year 2 in the Big 12. And once again, like I said, it makes me eat my words. I love when guys make me do that, because it proves that my evaluation, which pales in comparison to many out there, it's wrong. And I love when guys prove me wrong when it comes to BYU, because that means the BYU football program benefits from that as well. All right. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys in terms of like some superlatives, some awards I handed out. And like I said, if you got an idea of what I might call these going forward, I'd like to hear it. Oh, one other one real quick, just on the quarterback battlefront. I thought about awarding an award for that, but I couldn't really think of anything effective that made sense. So essentially coming down the pipe is that the wait and see award. Who's going to be the guy? Who's going to be the guys at quarterback for BYU? Is it Jake? Is it Gerry? Is it both of them? TBD. So we'll see where it all ultimately pans out in the end for BYU.